It's a brand new year, it's 2026, and a very common question people are starting to ask is, well, what's your real estate market prediction for this year right here in Minot? That's why I decided to make this presentation and give my real estate market prediction for 2026 right here in Minot. But before we get started, this is simply just a prediction. None of my predictions are guaranteed to actually happen. Now, before we talk about 2026, let's rewind to 2021, which is, I think, a very important year in the real estate industry. Coming out of the pandemic, mortgage interest rates, the percentage average was 2.5%, extremely low. And right here in Minot, for a single family house, the average sold price was $260,000. If we look at last year in 2025, the single family house, the average sold price was $313,000, a 20% increase from 2021 for the average sold price for a single family house. And mortgage interest rates, they varied. At the end of 2025, rates dropped significantly, with Freddie Mac data showing the 30-year fixed rate at 6.250%. And currently in January 2026, rates dropped further, with 30-year fixed rates around 6%, the lowest since late 2022. Why does that matter? Because a lot of people that maybe bought their house in 2021, a very common thing people would say is, well, why would I want to sell my house and buy a new house if the interest rate is 7%? It doesn't make any sense for me to give up this interest rate that I have and buy a house with the higher rate. But if we look at, of course, every single house has different numbers for what it could potentially sell for. But just a simple insight of the average sold price going from 260 to 313, a 20% increase. It's like, well, maybe if I bought a house back then, or maybe I bought it in 2020 or 2019, maybe I have some equity in this that it potentially went up. I can't say this enough. Every house is different. And maybe now the mortgage interest rate actually makes sense for me to sell and buy. Another insight that we're going to look at next is the stock market insights. Maybe this homeowner had some investments that did pretty well over the last 5 years. We're just going to look at one stock. I'm not a stockbroker. I'm simply looking at one for a general idea of what maybe could have happened to your same investments. So the S&P 500 Vanguard ETF is up 82% over the past 5 years. So if we couple home equity plus maybe performing well investments and lower interest rates, what does that mean? Does it make sense now to maybe they need more space? That same family needs to upsize. Maybe they bought their house in 2020, 2021. They have a 3-bed, 2-bathroom house. Maybe it's time for they need 4 bedrooms or 5. Or maybe the opposite is true. Maybe a family needs to downsize. The kids are off in college, they're out of the house. We just have all this space to where now we just don't need this big of a house. We want one level living. So you might see home equity that they want to use as a down payment after the net proceeds from selling their house. Plus maybe some investments performed well, use that as a potential down payment, and lower interest rates. So what does that equal? Does it mean that more homeowners are going to actually sell their house now and buy? It's a great question. But my prediction is potentially more inventory coming, but still seller's market leaning. So we might see more options for a buyer to purchase, but I still think that it's going to be seller's market leaning in terms of days on market, competition, and being potentially more favorable for a seller, but you might have more options to buy as a buyer, as opposed to maybe in the past it was around here. This is simply just a prediction, but I think given all the data, we might have more homes coming up for sale. Hopefully you found this video valuable. Again, it's just a prediction. I think it's a very informative conversation to have, but thank you for watching. Have a good one. Bye.